extremely well planned.
If you know how to bypass all of the security devices, you're going to have a detailed layout of the whole of the business. So they're going to be looking at that.
Police are still trying to identify everyone affected. Jeweller Wahid Khan has told LBC some of his possessions could have been stolen.
It's mostly like diamonds, gemstones, emerald. It is a lot. It was bank holidays, like long weekend, and it was sure, like obviously safe, like more secure than anywhere else, but unfortunately it's not secure.
Ed Miliband is calling on the Conservatives to sign up to Labour's plans to abolish the non-dom tax break status. The Labour leader announced the proposals to abolish a loophole used to shield overseas earnings from UK tax. Liberal Democrat leader Nick Clegg told LBC the system does need to be fairer.
Let's look at the case of maybe ending non-dom status after a certain number of years. But there are people who come to this country for a certain period of time who want to keep their ties to their own home country, and we've got to make sure that they are welcome. So I think it's about getting the right balance between keeping our country open but not open to abuse.
UKIP leader Nigel Farage says he'd charge a higher premium for people to have non-dom status. Protests have been held in America following the shooting of an unarmed black man by a police officer. The policeman, Michael Slager, has been charged with murder after video footage appeared to show him shooting Walter Scott in the back. The Conservatives have set out plans to force primary school pupils who fail to get a good pass in maths and English SATs to take the tests again in secondary school. Labour claim the policy proves England's state schools are failing, but David Cameron has told LBC resits can be vital for children's futures.
When children fall behind, the best thing to do is not to sort of cover that up or look the other way or pretend it doesn't matter. The best thing to do is put it right, and that's why you must have these resits to make sure that these children get the skills they need so they can go on and achieve all their full potential.
A man accused of murdering Russian spy Alexander Litvinenko believes he might have killed himself accidentally after handling radioactive material. Dmitry Kovtun denies being involved in the poisoning of the former KGB officer in London 9 years ago. Sir Terry Pratchett's final novel, The Shepherd's Crown, is going to be published later this year. The author, who died last month at the age of 66, sold millions of copies of his books set in his creation of Discworld. LBC weather staying dry tonight for London and the southeast, lows of 7 degrees, a similar picture for much of the UK. Patchy cloud and a ground frost likely for Wales and the northwest. Tomorrow, dry and warm with some good spells of sunshine, highs of 20 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Ros Unwin.
I'm Joanne Webb. In the LBC Travel Centre, there are long delays on the M25 clockwise from junction 17 at Maple Cross to junction 21 at the M1, and that's because of an accident where 2 lanes are closed. A lorry's broken down on the M3 southbound just before junction 3 at Lightwater, so there are quite lengthy queues on the approach as one lane is still closed for recovery. Ever so busy on the A4 heading westbound from the Medway underpass to the Greenford flyover after an accident that happened earlier, but also there's a problem in Greenford itself, actually on the Greenford Road northbound at Rotware Avenue, so there are restrictions and that's causing queues back onto the A40, which is obviously not helping things. Long delays in central London in Holborn. Kingsway remains closed in both directions after that fire. A car was on fire on the A12 earlier northbound just after junction 14 at Margaretting. Well, that's now being closed at junction 14 because of that fire. The queues now all the way back to the M25 junction, looking absolutely horrendous. On the A13 eastbound at the Beckton flyover, a car has broken down and there are queues all the way back to the Canning Town flyover. And on the underground, there are still severe delays on the Central Line. Keeping London moving, your next travel update is in 15 minutes.
LBC Travel.
With Go-To Meeting. Work from home and avoid the tough commute.
Back pain is the leading cause of long-term sickness in the UK. But how do you choose the office chair that's right for you? Back2 is the answer. With a wide range of beautiful ergonomically designed office chairs and sit-stand desks and professional no-obligation advice. Too busy? No problem. We'll carry out a workstation assessment in your office. Back2, open every day in Wigmore Street and online at back2.co.uk. Get back to business with Back2, the office chair experts.
This is LBC, leading Britain's conversation. Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. LBC's Election Call.
Hello, a very good evening. Welcome to LBC's election call. Every day during the campaign, we're giving you the chance to question a senior politician about what matters most to you. Across the week, we'll hear from all the major parties as Britain decides. And for the next 30 minutes, it's the turn of the Labour Party. Dame Tessa Jowell joins me in the studio to take your calls. The number to call, 0345 6060 973. And don't forget, you can watch us at lbc.co.uk. We're being streamed in HD, whatever that means. Tessa Jowell, welcome again. Nice to see you.
Thank you
Are
very
you
much
enjoying the campaign so far?
I am enjoying the campaign very much indeed.
Have you been going around in the pink bus?
I've been out, yes, I've been out on the pink bus and went to Enfield and met a really wonderful group of 18-year-old girls. We talked about a whole range of issues. I was there with Joan Ryan, who's the Labour candidate for Enfield, former MP. And you know what was really impressive about there were about 20, as I say, 20 girls. They were all registered to vote and they all intended to vote.
Well, that's probably the exception, we have to say.
Don't assume that at all.
Well, I do from all the figures I see. 25% is the average rate.
But here you are, you know, these young people are absolutely fired up about voting and thinking very hard about how they're going to.
And we should tell anyone who isn't on the electoral register, you've got until the 20th of April to register your vote, and you can do it online. Just Google voter registration, and I'm sure the correct site will come up. Now, we've got lots of callers waiting to talk to you, Tessa. Before we do, though, I just want to quickly ask you about Boris Johnson, because we've had several quite momentous events in London over the past couple of days, the heist being one, and we haven't...
But also the fire.
The fire as well.
Which has caused havoc in that part of London. He's become a sort of
Scarlet Pimpernel mayor. They seek him here, they seek him there. But what's happened to him?
Well, I think as we here ready to take calls, perhaps we can call on the mayor to phone in and let us know where he is and whether he's been properly briefed about the heist and the consequences for all those box holders, but also whether he's been properly briefed on what he's doing to minimise the disruption around Holborn.
Do you think he's taken his eye off the job now he's standing to be an MP?
Well, it's almost impossible to be standing as an MP and hold one of the biggest jobs in the country, which is to be Mayor of London.
Do you think he's forgotten Londoners? Apart from Uxbridge?
Well, I think at the moment he's wholly and solely focused on his, what will be his new constituency, and no doubt, on the basis that the Tories lose the election, the leadership contest that will follow. So I think, I said this at the time when he said he was going to stand as a member of Parliament, to be a member of Parliament, that Londoners would be the losers. And I think the last couple of weeks are the evidence of that.
Should we go to the callers?
Yeah,
I think it's about time, isn't it? Let's go to Murray, who's in Farringdon. Hello, Murray.
Hello there.
Hi. What would you like to ask Tessa?
I'd like to ask Tessa, isn't this Labour stance on the non-DOMs purely electioneering on their part?
Perish the thought, Tessa Jowell.
I don't know. It's certainly not electioneering. It's I think it's a long overdue change. I mean, is it really fair that people can come and live in our country, live here for very many years, to all intents and purposes, be citizens of our city or anywhere else in the UK, but not pay tax in the way that all the rest of us pay tax?
But they do. They do pay normal tax on their UK income, don't they?
Well, but they don't pay tax on the income that they earn elsewhere, which, if they were UK residents, they would. And to all intents and purposes, many of these people are UK citizens. They live here, their homes are here, their children go to school here, they use our public services. And so, of course, they should pay tax, the tax which funds those essential public services. So it's not electioneering, it's a long overdue change.
I don't want to put words into Murray's mouth, but it could be considered to be electioneering when it's announced during an election campaign, when apparently, according to rumours, they had thought of doing this quite a few months ago, but decided to leave it to the election campaign, presumably to draw attention to the fact that it's a very different policy than the Conservatives have.
Well, of course, of course you bring forward proposals during an election campaign because they're part of the platform on which you stand, Murray, and people can decide on the strength of those proposals whether they're going to vote for you or not. I think, just from the conversations I've been able to have today about this, that this will be a popular move by Labour and it will be supported by people as something which is fair.
Murray, quick response from you.
Yes, a response from me is, have Labour worked out the amount of tax that these non-DOMs actually pay here in the United Kingdom? Have they done their numbers on that side? And in addition to that, I don't see it at all. I don't think they're looking at the long-term benefits that these people bring in terms of the wealth that they bring into the country. And whilst they may be avoiding taxes paid on income earned abroad, what about the colossal amounts of tax that they may be paying here in the UK? And if they drive these people away, is that really going to be good for the UK?
Well, let's deal with the last point first, Murray. And, this is an issue which comes up often, like, when the tax on the bankers' bonuses was introduced. And don't you remember we were all told that these bankers would leave and go and live in other cities and other countries? And in fact, it didn't happen then. And I don't believe that it will happen now. Why not? Because London is a great city to live in. And these people who are very welcome here, they're well off. They love London. They love everything that London has to offer. All we ask of them is that they pay their tax like everybody else does.
Right, let's move on to another question. David is in Ladbroke Grove. Hi, David.
Good evening. Yes. Tessa.
Hello, David.
Good evening. In light of the horrors of ISIS and the extremists that are going over to join them and the Iraq war and the lies that led us into it, do you think it was really more harm than good for Tony Blair to have been making speeches on your behalf yesterday?
No, I don't think it was... it was anything but a good and constructive intervention in the election campaign to set out certainly what the Labour Party believes is the damage that would be caused by the instability of a long drawn-out campaign, a referendum campaign, to determine whether or not we remain members of the European Union. And I don't know what line of business you're in, David, but you will know how intricately London's economy, and indeed the economy of the whole UK, is connected to the European markets and our membership of the European Union. But Tony Blair, I think, was taking an argument and saying, look, here's the proposition and here's why that proposition would actually damage the UK economy.
Go on, David.
Yes, but this is a Prime Minister that's still out, the jury's still out with the Chilcot inquiry as to whether he's a war criminal for taking us into war for business, after all, in Iraq. I mean, why is he standing up a war criminal and standing up and saying...
Well, hold on, David. He is not a war criminal. The Chilcot inquiry has yet to report, and I think Tony Blair regrets as much as anybody else does the fact that Chilcot have taken so long in their deliberations and that we've all had to wait so long for the report. So that isn't a fair charge.
Have you spoken to him recently about that? About the Chilcot inquiry. How do you know that he regrets that it's taking so long?
Well, because he said so publicly, and I have spoken to him recently, but not about that.
What have you spoken to him about?
I don't think it's any of your business, quite honestly, Ian.
If I don't ask, I
do
don't
you, David?
Get.
Well, no, I just think that, were you for the Iraq war? And we did go there for business after all, did we not?
I voted, I supported the invasion of Iraq. I think that there were very clear lessons to be learned, particularly about what I do believe was an error, was that we surrendered responsibility for the reconstruction of Iraq after the invasion to the Americans. And I think the kind of destruction at that time of Iraqi civil society, the Iraqi army and so forth, did long-term damage. And I think that that was an error. I don't think it was an error to see Iraq rid of Saddam Hussein.
Let's go to Ian, who's in Brighton. Hello, Ian.
Oh, hi there, yeah.
Hello, Ian.
Hi there, good evening.
Good evening.
I don't think there's a problem... Yeah, hi. I don't think there's a problem particularly with Labour Party policy. You could argue it either way, just as you could do with the Tories. I think your major problem is with your choice of leadership in the shape of Ed Balls and Ed Miliband.
Well, will it surprise you to say that I absolutely disagree with you, Ian?
I wouldn't go on Mr. Balls, obviously, but you have to consider, have you run a business or been in work prior to being a politician?
Yes, I have. I had a 20-year career before I came into Parliament.
OK, and were you in a position of responsibility?
Yes, I was.
So you made some large decisions?
I made big decisions, yes.
OK, so if you were employing somebody who the previous year had bankrupted your country and they came back asking for their job back, would you have given it to them?
No, well, I wouldn't accept your premise that the last Labour government...
You've got no choice to, really. You left the letter there saying sorry, there's no money left.
Listen, what the last Labour government, Gordon Brown, Alistair Darling, had to handle was a collapse in the global banking system. They had to, and they had to ensure that our banks were capitalised so that you and I, when we went to the cash point, could actually get money out. I mean, we were that close to a kind of meltdown crisis. So far from deserving blame, I think both Gordon Brown and Alistair Darling deserve praise for their stoicism and their judgment and the way they steered not just our country, but Gordon Brown's leadership of the G20 steered governments around the world.
So no fault at all for anything that happened, no fault for overspending prior to that?
I don't, Ian, I don't apologise for the fact that we built schools and hospitals. My constituency, my South London former constituency, saw 5 new secondary schools desperately needed, funded principally from Exchequer Capital. So, no, I don't.
OK. Right, we've got another 15 minutes or so to take calls. 0345 6060 973. Ian, thank you for your very spirited call. Tessa did mean that, by the way. This is LBC. It's 17 minutes past 6. Oh, I'm sorry. I do apologise. I thought we were going for a break there, but we're not. We are going to continue with Norman, who's in Rickmansworth. Hello, Norman.
Hello, Norman.
Hi. I admire the fact that you object to people coming into the country and not contributing towards the outgoings of this country and feel it should be stopped. Why do you deny the UK population a referendum, the right to say, we object to people coming into this country who do not work, who claim benefits, and send the money home? Not even bring it here, they send it home.
Well, Norman, the first, presumably, can I just check with you that you're talking about EU migration?
I'm talking about EU migration, where people claim benefits, do not contribute to this country, and you deny us the right to even have the intelligence to say whether we agree to it or not. You say we must accept it, but you object to it when it comes to rich people who bring money into this country.
Well, Norman, can I just say in relation to EU migrants, on average, it's between 7 and 8% of us will claim benefits at some point in our lives. The figure for EU migrants is 2% or a bit less than 2%. And EU migrants are net contributors to our tax system. They don't cost our country. And so I think that, there's a lot of propaganda in what is a very heated and entirely legitimate debate. But I think it's important not to let these facts get lost.
What about the issue of Tony Blair's speech yesterday, which you did talk about a moment ago? Because that was written up as Tony Blair basically saying we can't trust the people to make a sensible decision, therefore we're not going to give them a referendum. I think that's a fairly accurate summary of what he said. Why is it that the Labour Party is so afraid of a referendum? I just got a text here from Graham in Bramley who says, after Blair's intervention, I'm voting UKIP.
Well, that was how his speech was interpreted. I read his speech. He doesn't say that. So did I.
He doesn't say that word for word.
No, of course he doesn't.
But he says after what happened in Scotland, basically the people can't be trusted to make the right decision on Europe.
No, he didn't. He didn't talk about people not being trusted to make the right decision. It is absolutely the case that where there's treaty change, and we've signed up to this, then there is a case for putting the nature of the treaty changes to the people. But you see, I think that when, and people who will call in and tell me if I'm wrong about this, but I think you see so often Europe and our membership of the European Union is used as a kind of straw man or a proxy for other things that people worry about.
Like immigration.
Like immigration.
But it's not, you see, the point is,
like
it's not a straw man on that.
Made.
It's not a straw man on that, because you can't do anything about immigration while we remain full members of the EU.
Well, except, Ian, I have to say, I don't believe that any of the other European leaders would believe at the moment that our Prime Minister and our coalition government consider themselves full members of the European Union. There's a very important thing about
the fact is we are.
Yeah, but we don't act as if we are. We act as if we're kind of sitting on the edge of the stage, waiting to dash off. And there's a very important point about how you negotiate with other European countries, which is that you go round, you make relationships with other prime ministers and European leaders, and you set out your case. You build allies for change and reform. And that's what David Cameron has let down the British people by failing to do. And
well, he would say he has. He would say that he's got Angela Merkel to agree that there does need to be a reform of some aspects of the EU. Now, I would probably agree with you that they're not going to go as far as he wants them to go, but it's not true to say that he hasn't tried to build allies, is it?
Well, I don't agree that he's tried to build allies. I think he's been utterly inept in the way he's managed our relationship with Europe. Europe is a very important trading market for us, on which millions of jobs in this country depend. And I don't believe that he's safeguarded that. I'd also say, and Norman, I don't know if you're still there, but certainly in all the years that I've been a member of Parliament, 23 years, I think twice on the doorstep, and I've spent a lot of time talking to my constituents, the issue of Europe per se has been raised. And so that's why I stick to my point that it's a proxy for so many other things that people have legitimate concern about.
Quick comment from you.
Yes, I would just want to ask where Tessa gets her figures to say 2%. It's arrogant to suggest that there are any figures, because no one knows the number of migrants in this country, the amounts that are being paid out in benefits, because no statistics are done it. They're made up.
Well, no, they're not made up, Norman.
How many have come in? How many have come in the last 5 years?
Well, I can't give you that figure, but listen, can I just answer the source of my figures? I asked the House of Commons Library to look at these two issues, and they produced the figures for me. They are studiously neutral, and so I think they are figures that you can rely on.
And the House of Commons Library is very neutral, isn't it? So that's sort of parliamentary equivalent of the IFS. You have to say the respected.
It is the respected.
Now, you can watch us, don't forget, lbc.co.uk, get a glimpse of our new studio. Let's go to Mark, who's in Hendon. Hello, Mark.
Hi.
Hello, what would you like to ask?
Basically, I'd like to get back to this business of why we would vote in a government that was responsible for bankrupting the country. I don't think that the issue was dealt with properly just then. I'd just like to make a couple of quick points. Firstly, the government was responsible for the regulation of the banks at the time. So to blame, so to say that they didn't have any responsibility for the financial crisis is misleading. Secondly, if we're talking about judgment skills, selling your gold reserves at the lowest possible price is probably one of the poorest judgment skills ever exhibited by a Prime Minister, and that was Gordon Brown. So perhaps we should recognise that point.
Well, let's deal with those two first. Tessa.
Well, on the point about under-regulation, Mark, I think that is a fair criticism. But, sometimes these charges are made as if ministers, as if politicians have unique powers of foresight. And certainly in the light of what happened with Lehman Brothers, what has been revealed as the behaviour of other banks, the banks were under-regulated. They were allowed too much secrecy and too much sort of running the regimes to the advantages of the huge bonuses that were then paid out. So I absolutely agree with you, but I think it's...
And what about the gold? I mean, that was a ludicrous decision to sell off the gold at a market low.
Well, I mean, it was a decision that Gordon Brown, as Chancellor, considered was necessary in the light of the the circumstances of the UK economy at the time.
That's a ridiculous explanation. The economy was very strong at that time.
Well, listen, Ian, it may be a ridiculous, in your view, a ridiculous explanation.
I think the facts would point to that.
But it is an explanation of the position at the time. He made the judgment. He was Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Why not just admit he got it wrong?
Well, because, he made that judgment at the time. I don't know what the countervailing advice was at that time.
Virtually every single economist said he got it wrong.
Well, he was Chancellor of the Exchequer, and sometimes, when you are a minister, you have to make very difficult decisions in the light of the best advice you get, and then you have to stand up and support those decisions.
What's a decision you made as a minister that you feel in retrospect, I got that wrong?
I would like to have done more to lock in the funding for sport for children in schools, which became incredibly important to people, was a very popular policy, and then proved vulnerable to a stroke of Michael Gove's pen after the election. And if I had my time over again, I would have done more.
See, that is a brilliant politician's answer, because you used it to knife the opposition, which is quite skillful.
Well, it's true, it's a fair point to make. But you asked me a question, and it's a question I think about. It's a question I think about a lot.
Do you think a lot of politicians really go through agonies about decisions that they make? Because I think a lot of people listening will think, as you said, stroke of the pen, without actually thinking of sometimes what the consequences might be.
Shall I tell you the toughest decision that I had to make, or I had to support, was, I don't know if you remember this, there was a big crisis of confidence in the triple vaccine given to young children, MMR, and was this actually a vaccine that caused autism and Crohn's disease? And I was Public Health Minister at the time, and I remember going on holiday, having received advice from the Chief Medical Officer that we should continue the advice to parents that their children should receive the triple vaccine. And I remember going on holiday at the beginning of August and thinking, if I've got this wrong, then how many children will be affected by autism as a result of my failure to challenge this or to make another decision? And so these are the kind of decisions you have to take. And you hope at the time that they're decisions you take on the basis of the best available information, obviously informed by what you believe, your values. And you hope you've taken the right decision. But an awful lot in government is on balance rather than absolutely clear cut. And that's part of the complexity of government, which sounds boring and tedious, but which is the fact of every day.
Government is to choose. Caroline is in Harrow. What's your question, Caroline?
Oh, hello, Tessa.
Hello, Caroline.
Hi. What I wanted to say is I'm going to support Labour and I'm going to vote Labour.
Hooray!
And one of the things that one of the things I wanted to ask was, there's an absolute gem of an opportunity for the Labour Party to say that, I know that Ed Miliband has actually said, if Labour comes into power, that he's going to reverse the tribunal fees regime that was imposed by the coalition. Since that's been enforced, there's been an 80% drop in people being able to get justice because, they haven't got any money and they can't fight their
you want
employer.
to see that reversed?
I want to see that reversed. And it's I've worked in local government and I've been a supporter of the Labour Party and I'm actually a HR professional. And, people have rights. You go to work and, your big employer cannot crush you. And I've fought, for a long time, even though I'm a HR professional and I advise properly and I'm quite fair in what I do, And, you know, this is fundamental for the people of this country. There are more people that are working for employers in this country than there are big businesses, and this is very, very important for people.
Okay.
So
Well,
Caroline,
I agree with you, and you talk about it with great authority. And, you know, there is no point in having rights if you can't exercise them. And I'm very concerned about aspects of our justice system, the impact of cuts in legal aid, and of course the deterrent effect of tribunal fees. And I just hope that, you know, we win this election on the 7th of May and we can begin once again to overhaul this, because the people who lose out, and this is why you know, the trade unions have been so active on this, the people who lose out are the most unprotected and the most vulnerable.
Well, that brings us to the end of our half an hour. It's flown by, Tessa. Thank you very much indeed for joining us here on LBC. Now, tomorrow, LBC hosts our Women Leaders debate. 4 of Britain's most senior female politicians are going head-to-head on all the key election issues. Nicky Morgan for the Conservatives, Labour's Harriet Harman, UKIP's Suzanne Evans and Lynn Featherstone from the Lib Dems will square off in this 90-minute debate, which I'll be hosting from 7 o'clock. So to take part, go to lbc.co.uk and submit your question. There is still time. That's the LBC Women Leaders debate this Thursday evening from 7. Now, coming up tomorrow also on LBC's election call, Nick Ferrari will have Nick Clegg with him from 9 o'clock. And also on Friday, Petri Hoskin will be talking to UKIP's Paul Nuttall.